Hello, everyone. This is the third lecture of week 7. And again, you can listen to it as an audio. And please also read Exodus 4 before you listen to this lecture. When we left off, God had just commissioned Moses to go back to Egypt. And after some back and forth, God also finally told Moses his name so that he could be identified to the Israelites who seemed to have little awareness of who this God is. Now, despite all of this, despite God identifying himself and so forth, Moses, however, still seems to remain rather reluctant to undertake this task that he is commanded to do. Okay, and so as a result, God in Exodus 4 keeps showing him one miracle after another until, that is until Moses comes up with sort of a last excuse. Okay, and this is what he tells God in Exodus 4, verse 10. But Moses said to the Lord, "Oh, my Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor even now that you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." Okay. Now, this is a bit of a strange thing to say. Scholars debate what this means, right? Maybe he had a stutter, some speculate. Maybe he's just lying to think of an excuse not to do this job. The actual strange aspect of Moses's excuse about him being not good, slow of tongue, okay, whatever it may mean, is that it seems to conflict with what we are told about Moses earlier in Exodus 1 and 2. Remember in Exodus 1 and 2, Moses was said to have been picked up by Pharaoh's daughter and therefore raised in the court, and likely, therefore, he was trained in being a good speaker, okay? Indeed, the story gets weirder because God, of course, has a nifty little solution to Moses's problem with his speech, right? And this is found in Exodus 4, verses 13 and following. But he said, "Oh, Lord, please send someone else." I mean, Moses really does not want to do this. Okay. Verse 14, then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "What of your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know that he can speak fluently. Even now he's coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, his heart will be glad. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you what you shall do. He indeed shall speak for you to the people, who shall serve as a mouth for you, and you shall serve as God for him." Very strange. Okay. And then later, of course, this indeed happens, right? Verse 27, the Lord said to Aaron, "Go into the wilderness to meet Moses." So he went and he met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. Right. So God has a nifty solution. He says, well, what about your brother Moses? He's a really good speaker. Okay. But of course, if you're following the text, right, from Exodus 1 to now, only 4 chapters later, the question is, who the hell is Aaron? We've not met this guy before, okay? And yet, it seems like everybody else in the story knows who he is, right? However, if you're following the text linearly, in Exodus 1 and 2, remember, Moses barely escapes with his life. Why? Because Pharaoh is chucking little Israelite male babies into the Nile. And again, if you take that story into account, how the heck did Aaron escape? I mean, it was tough enough for Moses to escape. So what was, did they do that again with Aaron, right? Also, why hasn't Moses mentioned Aaron before yet? When God says to Moses, "Hey, your brother Aaron, he's coming to meet you," Moses doesn't say, "Who the hell is Aaron? I've never met." So later in Exodus 4, Moses does seem to know who Aaron is. In short, the only way to really make sense of this is to say that Exodus 3 and 4 are not, these chapters are not connected to Exodus 1 and 2, okay? Like I said before, the biblical stories are quasi-linear, but they're not coherent, okay? They've been put into a general order that the redactor or the editor who put them together sort of spliced stories from different traditions into an order that they thought was appropriate, okay? But because of that, they're not coherent necessarily in the linear order that they were put, okay? In Exodus 1 and 2, Moses is, as I've argued, portrayed as a royal figure, divinely saved, so that he can fulfill his destiny to lead a new group of people. In Exodus 3 and 4, we have a very different vision of Moses, probably coming from a different tradition, where Moses is really a prophet or a messenger or a representative of God through whom God will communicate, someone who acts as a go-between, okay? Indeed, there's actually a third vision of Moses that is hinted here. Okay, and it has to do with this very strange, very difficult to understand um, role that Aaron is supposed to play. You know, Aaron is to Moses what Moses is to God, right? And you're like, why there's so many intermediaries? What is this about? Okay. Um, so and the way to make sense of this is to figure out who Aaron is, right? As I said, we haven't been introduced to Aaron, okay? And to figure out why Aaron is important, okay? Remember that Moses, who is Aaron's brother, is said to have been a Levite from the tribe of Levi, right? And that both his mother and his father were Levites, okay? So likely Aaron, being Moses' brother in this tradition, is also descended from the same Levite mother and father. And as you know, the Levites will be the tribe that will produce the priests of Israel and Judah. Okay, and why this is the case? Why scholars debate why the Levites were chosen. Okay, for this role. However, just because all priests were said to descend from Levi, and the biblical text is a bit complicated about whether that was actually true, but okay. This did not mean, however, that all Levites were equal. Okay. Just like now, there were probably a lot more Levites, a lot more ministers, than there were positions for that. Okay, there's something so changed, right? And there were big churches and little churches, as now, back then as well, okay? So as a result, there was lots of variations among the Levitical groups, okay? And one of the components of a Levitical group was who your priestly forefather was, okay? As the cult structure of Israel gets established, and it's complicated and it's long, okay, eventually the most powerful group that will emerge out of the priestly groups will the group that runs the temple and maybe is behind the P text, okay, although P may be a little more complicated. The most powerful group likely were descended from Aaron, okay. And this may be the reason why Aaron gets kind of chucked into here all of a sudden into the text to be a spokesman or another intermediary for Moses and for God by extension. Okay. So then, okay, where does that leave Moses? Well, again, considering that Moses and Aaron are from the same line, both of them are priests, and that Aaron is a famous ancestor of the main kind of most powerful priesthood in Israel, Moses likely, and this is the third role that Moses is kind of portrayed at, Moses was also a founder of a very famous line of priests. He was also a priestly forefather. Okay, indeed, the priests that are descended from the Moses line are called Mushite priests in a part of the Bible. Okay, so Aaron and Moses both become forefathers of different groups of priests. Okay, probably priestly groups who are in competition with each other to, get the best positions. Okay. And this competition between the priestly groups are reflected in the chapters going forward about Aaron and Moses and this kind of flight from Egypt, okay? Sometimes, as you'll see, Aaron is kind of pushed to the front, as here, okay? Sometimes Moses will be pushed to the front. Sometimes Aaron will be portrayed rather badly. Sometimes Moses will be portrayed very badly, okay? For example, Aaron will be the person that performs the first miracle in front of Pharaoh in Exodus 7. Okay, so that's a very good picture of Aaron, but Aaron will also be blamed, for example, later in the golden calf. So that's a negative portrayal of Aaron. So all this back and forth really indicates some type of rivalry between Aaronite and Mushite priests that came to be reflected in the text about Aaron and Moses. Okay, indeed, scholars actually speculate there might have been not just these two, but 3 groups of priests, okay, who were not originally related to each other, but were transformed into family groups once the tradition kept going, okay? Remember that Moses and Aaron have a sibling, okay, Miriam. And Miriam, in, for example, Exodus 1 and 2, though she is not named there, is instrumental, for example, making sure that Moses survives his little trip down the river. Lots of scholars think that Miriam might also have been a founder of a priestly group, possibly a female priest, okay, or priestesses, who were eventually edged out and delegitimated by male priests. Who knows, maybe during the monarchy, okay? Again, it doesn't, some of this is repeated in history, okay? This kind of edging out, okay? And then the return of female, I guess, religious cultic officials and so forth. And scholars speculate that this is the reason why Miriam's story is suppressed in parts or oddly cut off or take a strange negative turn in parts of the book of Exodus, okay? Remember that this text was edited by groups affiliated with the priests. Likely the priests and the scribes are all kind of intermingled, right? They're the kind of elites. And maybe this book was edited by priests who are affiliated with Aaron. And so there's reasons why they may want to delegitimate or illegitimate Miriam, okay? Again, there seems to be some evidence of them trying to illegitimate Moses's priestly line too, but it might have been that Moses was such a well-known priestly forefather that they couldn't do so, okay? Continuing on with the story, after God convinces Moses to take on this role of leading the Israelites out of Egypt, okay? Again, this reluctance, Moses' reluctance probably has something to do with him being a prophet, right? Original, authentic prophets resisted their call, right? So that they can be seen as authentic, okay? Anywho, after all this, we are told that Moses finally accepts his call and he starts to head towards Egypt with his whole family. And when he starts heading to Egypt, that's when this happens, okay? So this is Exodus 4, verse 24 through 26, okay? On the way, that is on the way back to Egypt, okay? At a place where they spent the night, the Lord met him, that is Moses, and tried to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint and cut off his son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet. Feet is, again, a code word for the penis. With it, and said, truly you are a bridegroom of blood to me. So he let him alone. And it was then, she said, a bridegroom of blood by circumcision. So when Moses starts to head towards Egypt, okay, to fulfill this call that God made him do, God attacks him one night, okay? We have no idea what the story is about. Do not write your paper on the story. It will be extremely difficult, okay? We have seen God as portrayed as a kind of violent night deity before, for example, with Jacob and the wrestling match, okay? So this is not unusual, and maybe this is a kind of foreshadow of the last plague, right? Where God will appear as a kind of avenging or a death angel, right? That wipes out the firstborn of Egypt. So maybe that's why this is in there. And scholars have speculated as to what the story is about and why God is so mad that he wants to kill Moses right after Moses decides to take God up on his offer to do this new job God wants him to do. Some argue that God was mad that Moses was not circumcised, although seems to be Moses' kid who was not circumcised. And we do find out later in Joshua that it's likely the case that the Israelites were not practicing circumcision. Later in Joshua group, the Israelites have to be circumcised again, it states in the text. You can't really be circumcised twice, so okay, anyways. Some think that the story is about why there is blood on the wedding night, or why grooms are called bridegroom of blood, or maybe some marital custom we don't know about. In short, we have no idea why this is here, okay? Notice that blood, again, it has a apotropaic or a protective function, right? Remember that blood in place, right, during sacrifice is protective, okay? Maybe purifying, some have argued. Blood out of place, right, such as with Cain and Abel, that's bad, okay? It's impure, okay? Again, we don't know what the story is about, okay, and why it was placed here, okay? Indeed, going forward in the rest of the narrative about Moses, the story is never referred to again, okay? However, to continue on with the story of Moses, go to the next video.